Howdy, y'all, and welcome to the Sports Card Cowboys. This ain't our first rodeo, but it's going to be your first rodeo with us. So let's get you introduced. My name is @signed and slabbed everywhere you look on the interwebs, aka Texas Dave. And this is my partner.
Howdy, y'all. This is @Ephus Pitch. You can find me on the interwebs, and some people call me Buckaroo Bill. We're excited to have you guys on this journey as we kick off our first podcast of many more in the weeks and months to come.
So look, what we're gonna do, why don't we give ourselves a good old proper introduction to you, and I'll let my man Buckaroo go first.
Thank you, Dave. So my journey into sports cards started when I was in my teenage years. My pops would take me to the sports card shop, as many probably people experienced. After practices, we'd go and rip a pack or two. And I remember those days with a great deal of fondness. And took about a 25-year hiatus from the card world. In between that, I developed a career in finance, which I'm sure we'll talk about in future episodes. And I also was deep into the art collecting world. And so I got a kind of different vantage point on the collecting business, the cast of characters that are associated with collecting. And like many people, I got back into the hobby, as it were, right around the pandemic, kind of the heart of the pandemic. So I've been in for about a year and a half now, and it's been a wild ride. And I was fortunate enough to get to know Signed and Slabbed a couple months back, and realized that we shared a lot in common in terms of how we thought about the world. And I think we also saw an opportunity to come together and talk a little bit about what's on our minds, and hopefully, impart some good old-fashioned knowledge as we go.
Yeah, and so my background was similar. I collected as a kid. My dad kind of got me into it, and my parents were entrepreneurs. They kind of owned their own accounting and bookkeeping service, and so as I really started gravitating towards card collecting, they suggested that I open a shop while I was in high school and be a business owner as a 16-year-old in high school. And so they helped me do that, got an office, opened a store, painted my own sign, put it up on the highway, and did that until I graduated high school, went to college. And then so when I was in college, I did a little bit of kind of investing, flipping, and just selling, just sort of helped me make ends meet while I was getting my degree. And then after college, kind of expanded beyond really card collecting into autograph collecting. I did a lot of in-person autograph seeking and similar types of things, which really sort of expanded some of the lanes that I operate in now, even today. And I had a 25 plus year career in accounting and finance, mostly around commodity trading, and did that until I was just sort of tired of working for other people, and decided, my son's gonna be 17 tomorrow, and just decided I wanted a little bit more freedom and family time to spend with him and my wife. And so took on the idea that maybe I could make cards and collectibles a living. So that was really the genesis of where Signed and Slabbed came from, was to basically try and grind it out based on the equity I'd built in my existing collection, and then buying and selling, going forward, partly to pay the bills, but certainly also to help me expand my collection. So, I think, Bill, we sort of got together based on an observation that we had, that post pandemic, a lot of people coming into the hobby, making content, and a number of, influencers, or what I think a new phrase that's been coined recently is thin influencers, that were, really good on the social media side in terms of generating attention, but really didn't have a whole lot of meaningful things to say. And we've both become pretty dissatisfied with that narrative around the hobby, and decided, instead of moaning and complaining about the garbage slash lack of content that we were seeing from some of these content providers, that we just might get together and provide the alternative content that we think people are really looking for.
No, I think that's absolutely right and well said. I mean, look, and it's not to say that there aren't people out there that aren't creating this content, as it were. There'll be some people that I believe that we'll even have on the show that we believe do a good job of that. But we do think there are, large swaths of the market, whether it be in baseball, whether it be in good old fashioned, game use memorabilia, and other areas, some of the off the run markets that don't get a lot of publicity but are interesting in their own right, that we felt like we're being largely underserved and underrepresented. And, we wanted to create something that we could kind of build on, kind of a library of sorts of content and knowledge for people to tap into, and get a different perspective out there, and hopefully a thoughtful one that helps to a lasting collecting experience, because we feel like that's that's one of the most rewarding things about what we're doing.
Yeah, agreed. So look, one of the taglines you'll hear pretty frequently from us: he's the brains, I'm the hair. So with that, we're going to head into what we consider our 10 commandments, or kind of core beliefs of what we want to be about here as the Sports Card Cowboys. So let's kick it off. Number 1, collect cool stuff, partners. The idea here is, look, we think cards, memorabilia, collectibles, they're just cool, man. As my man, the dude, would tell you, that's cool, man. Look, it's just a bonus that some of them are valuable financially. But the main value in what we collect is really about how it makes you feel and who you meet along the way, and the particularly fun moments and events that are part of that. So I know for me, and Bill, I'm sure will agree, a lot of the things that I'm attracted to in my collection elicit a nostalgia. And that's really what the hobby should be about, not how much it's worth. That's a incidental benefit to what we do.
Well, yeah, and I'd say the other thing that kind of comes out of that is I think if you make the focus collecting, and you put time into curating what that means to you, good things likely will come out of that. If you're not foolish with your money, and you're really thoughtful about it, and you in some respects develop kind of intellectual capital around the things that and know well, there's great dividends on the backside of that, whether that be through exchanging things through monetary value, or exchanging ideas with people that you like and you get to know.
Yeah.
Number 2 for us is what we're calling "Don't swipe the fun. It ain't all frowns and crying." And what we mean primarily by this is that we have to keep on reminding ourselves that we're all in this because it's fun, and some of those memories tie back to when we were kids, and we were ripping packs of the fun of it, and these grading companies were something that was very distant from our mind. And what was really important during those times was to put cards into sleeves or into binders, and go to a buddy's house and brag about or trade cards that you liked and were fond of. we don't want that to be lost in what we're trying to accomplish here. So I think that you'll see, that's kind of the core of what we're about. We hope to profile people that we believe spend a lot of time having fun doing what we all love and do in the sports card and collectible and memorabilia world. I think it's also worth pointing out that we need to keep in mind this is a hobby that just happens to have business interests, because it's a very attractive sector to a lot of different people from all walks of life. I mean, one of the things I love about sports cards is that it's a little bit of a melting pot. It brings together a lot of people from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic positions, and really throws them into the same bucket, as it were. And we hope that over the course of the next weeks, months, etc., that we keep that focus in mind, that this is a hobby, and there's some very powerful people and very powerful companies that have surrounded themselves around it. But we have to never lose sight of the fact that this is first and foremost a way to enjoy time, and something to really be hobbyists around.
Agreed. So number 3, one of our commandments is get the varnish off your tongue. What's that mean? It means we're going to do our best to be intellectually honest with you, our viewers. We're going to say what we think, and we're going to do our best to back it up. But that's why there's 2 of us here. And I can tell you, in the short amount of time we've gotten to know each other, we don't always agree on things, and we won't always agree on things, and we're going to battle each other and give people those choices. And at the end of the day, that's really how it should be. To really have good debate, good discussion, good kind of thought-provoking, input into how we collect, what we see from a market perspective, who we think is doing a good job, other people that we think can maybe do a better job. I mean, that's all part of that community. This isn't going to be a s'mores and kumbaya moment with the Sports Card Cowboys. But that doesn't mean we're just going to be in attack mode either. But we want to kind of bounce these ideas off each other with the concept that the cream will rise to the top as we do that, and with a continual focus on how each of us sort of curates that collection of our own. There's no one way to do it, and that's the point. There's one way for you to do it, which is your way, and we want to help cultivate that within the community.
Amen. Amen. Well, that leads into number 4, which is we'll lead you horses to water, but it's your choice to drink it. I mean, I think one of the things that we really hope to do is over time, share our perspectives and knowledge around this space, with the hopes that over time we'll receive some of that in return from our loyal listeners and viewers and guests that come on the show. We'll teach you how we fish, but it's your choice on how you, as Dave mentioned, it's your choice on how you decide to fish yourself. We'll talk about the ways in which, in Dave's case, he's been successful at doing this for nearly 3 decades. And I'll talk about a little bit about how, I entered, made some pretty meaningful mistakes and have corrected course and really found my lane. That's so much of what it means to be, a successful and happy collector, really, is figuring out, it's kind of putting a puzzle piece together and figuring out for yourself what makes sense to you, and imparting those perspectives and knowledge on other people. And it's your choice whether you take it or not. But that's number 4 for us.
And so number 5 comes along right with it. A good laugh is worth a good old punch in the face. So we're going to tell you what we think. And we're going to try to be funny and entertaining. You're going to get some shtick. You're going to see some dude. You're going to see some cowboys. You're going to see some Elvis, right? once in a while to be a little less conversation and a little more action. We got all of it. Okay. And we appreciate this is the internet. We don't want to always waste your time. We want to try to entertain you, have a good laugh. But when in doubt, we will revert to sharing our knowledge, sharing our perspective, giving you guys those opinions and a lot of facts. And you decide to do with it what you want. I ain't here to think for you, right? I want to help you think. And we want y'all to help us think too, because I don't know everything. I got great hair, but I don't know everything. This cat's got a good old head on his shoulders, but he can learn a thing or two still, I think.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, look, and I think that it's fair to say on this point, I mean, this is not going to be the place to find get rich quick schemes.
Oh, it's
this is not the place to 3x your return in 30 days on the back of ripping somebody off.
As people have
That's
seen
just
on my
not.
story. Yeah, as people have seen on my story before. If you like rounders and you're worm, this ain't the spot, man. And
Yeah.
and nobody watching out there is Matt Damon. I can tell you that right now. So, hey, you want to learn how to drive the truck and feed the kids and get along, like we're down with that. But if you're looking for the get rich quick, like just make sure you got somebody that can pick you up off your face from the ditch.
Yeah, amen to that. And speaking of that, number 6 is Zack Ryder. You won't land on a wanted poster. There's been a lot of debate of late about positivity and negativity in the hobby. I can tell you that you're not going to find two guys that are more happy on life and very positive on the direction of where our own collecting is going and the people that we decide to associate with. But let's be honest, there are a lot of bad actors in this hobby. There's a lot of people that we believe have some dirty ill intentions for the hobby and will put themselves at the expense of other people. We see it time and time again, and we're just not going to stand for it. And while this is not going to be a podcast that ever devolves in a witch hunt contest, what it will be is, I think, a place where we can be very honest in a way that I think other people can't, around the things that we see that we believe diverge from a lot of the things we've already talked about, right? That see this hobby as not something to cater to hobbyists, but to cater to consumers. That see this as an extension of a way to rip people off with get rich quick schemes and really rob people from the fun that is collecting. Yep. And that is the hobby. So
yeah, I mean, look, we're not trying to be hobby watchdogs, so to speak, but we're not gonna necessarily just look the other way. Like, again, we feel like some other people do, in an effort to, whatever incentives or perverse incentives they may have to do so, which leads us really well into number 7. The truth don't have two versions. So I don't know about Bill. I know I am sick and tired of this idea that everything that anybody does may have some gray area to it. There's a lot of gray out there, certainly, but part of our desire to provide some of this alternative content is, quite honestly, because we think the integrity bar for participation and becoming a thin influencer in the hobby is maybe about an inch high if we're lucky. It's not even a speed bump, okay? And that's just not, we don't believe that serves you well in the hobby or in life. So we're going to speak our minds about it. And again, our opinions will be our own, but we're going to do our best to fact check, and we're going to make sure we try to, ask the questions that need to be asked. I may not have all the answers, but I know how to ask some questions. And again, we'll let we'll kind of let people decide on that. But it seems pretty clear to us right now that there have been a number of people and a number of events that just are not, no one would act that way in their normal life. And so why the hobby allows that to kind of continue to be pervasive over time, we don't understand, and we want to do our part to kind of call it out, or at least ask questions around it, so that people have a chance to make a decision.
That's well said. And that leads really well to number 8, which is there ain't enough gold in Fort Knox to tame these tongues. Look, I can tell you, we're doing this for free because we love it, and we think there's lots of our community that are vastly underserved. If that ever changes, you guys and gals are going to be the first people to know. I think that it's true that a lot of what Dave mentioned before around some of this perverse behavior and the lack of the feedback loop around policing that behavior has a lot to do with the incestuous nature of the hobby, where a lot of the luminaries are, 1 or 2 steps removed. I used this analogy the other day that it's like the British royal family. And, there's a lot of that goes on. And there's a cadre of 100 people or so that, really kind of rule the hobby and do so with, a spider web worth of sponsorships and promises. And we're not entangled by those things, and we don't plan to be. And to the extent to which we decide to take on sponsorship, or we have people approach us, we're gonna take that stuff to you guys in the first instance and see if that's something that we should do. Because we feel like this should be, a podcast that's dedicated to the community and making community-based decisions, because we just think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, 100%. Neither one of us, you or me, we didn't get here by, letting somebody else tell us what to do. We got here by trying to make informed, instructive decisions, and trying to build equity in our collections. You've got a real job. I used to have one. Right? This for me was a side hustle that became a real thing. But the fact is, I don't need sponsorship dollars to keep doing what I'm doing. As a matter of fact, it wouldn't really help me that much. Most of the crap that I've seen, like, I'd have sold it, way cheaper than anybody else would have. So,
Yeah.
That is just not going to be who we are. Which again also doesn't mean that, we won't consider those things in the future. I think we would, but we'll do it for people that we want to, that we've built a relationship with. And that we know what their intentions are, and that they're people that want to be here to help build the community, do things good for the hobby, not just, get a big fat wallet so they can, head out to, down into Mexico. They can't run off to Mexico and hide from us.
That's right.
So it leads us to number 9 on this one. Own your stuff. All of it. What does that mean? Look, the content you consume, or that you let your kids consume, is your responsibility, and your responsibility alone. The content we create is our responsibility. We take responsibility very seriously. In fact, today I posted on my stories around the crypto stuff that people are trying to, bail out some folks that made some, pretty dumb investments in something that they quite clearly didn't understand. And I think you and I both would have, numerous hobby stories, even of cards that we bought that we didn't understand, or, certainly people that were buying NFTs by some of the different providers, even just specifically in the sports space, that they didn't really understand. So, look, it's your responsibility to consume or not the things that you want to. It's our responsibility around the content that we create. And to that end, around what we create, we're going to do our very best to try and keep it PG-13, right? I think we both have kids. It's important to us that we can be, I'll say as close to family friendly as possible, because we want, I know both of us know that there are lots of dads and their kids or moms and their kids that are in this hobby. And like, that's a big connection. Bill talked about at the beginning, that was a connection he had with his dad. It was one that I had with mine. So that, that connection component with your family is important. So we're going to do our best to keep it PG-13. Couple things we can definitely commit to. We will keep our shirts on at all times, unless, and this is a big unless the Falcons, the Atlanta Falcons or the Houston Texans were to win a Super Bowl. I think it's not just highly probable, it is a near certainty that one of us will be seen on the interwebs without our shirt on. So in a Super Bowl win scenario, this is all off. But that was the one and only exclusion that both of us felt, compelled to include as the one caveat. So, if the Texans win the Super Bowl, the Texas Forever's coming off. I may get it Texans Forever tattooed on my chest. I don't know.
I'm sure we can come up with some elaborate bet.
Yeah.
To solidify this.
Yeah. So, that's the one caveat. Otherwise, we'll do our best to kind of control the language. And look, guys, we are not perfect. That from time to time, I'm sure not so educational word may escape our lips, but we don't think that'll be the regular. And that's why there's two of us. We'll do a little bit of policing on each other if we need to, and certainly want you guys to give that input as well. So.
Well, and that's a great way to kind of end our top 10 with we're gonna listen, to our audience and to the community that we hope to develop over time. We're going to seek your input and feedback as much as we can and incorporate those thoughts into the audience experience. We think that one of the things that's missing, frankly, right now is that there's kind of a group of content creators that are kind of just pushing their point of view over and over and over again, and there's really no feedback loop with their audience in a way that makes it really interactive for those folks, and helps them to make sense of maybe some of the things that folks are talking about, or to the extent to which we're covering a certain topic, to shift our focus a little bit more to cover maybe something that's directly or indirectly related to that topic to help further improve the user experience. So that's our commitment to you. It'll always be, and whether that's through direct feedback and some of the live stuff that we may do, or it's dropping us a DM, or it's dropping us an email, we are committed to making sure that we incorporate that feedback and really take some of those ideas and make them key topics of things that we talk about. One of the other things, before I transition to Dave, to some of the topics that we do plan to cover in the weeks and months ahead. The other thing that we've noticed is there's a lot of this content that, in some respects, disrespects the viewer, the listener, because it just goes on too long, and there's 3 hours of content, and there's 45 minutes of actually stuff that you want to listen to, or that's beneficial to your collecting experience. And when we got together and talked about this, one of the things that was very that was paramount on both of our minds was to make something that was consumable in a way that made sense over and over and over again. And so the way that we think about that is really to kind of try to condense the stuff into hour-long episodes, where we spend, call it, the first 5 or so minutes talking about the industry, maybe things that are going, topical things that are happening within the industry, and providing some quick takes to the extent to which we can. But we don't want to be known as kind of a a content creator, or folks in the industry that are just kind of gossiping all the time. We think there's enough of that out there that you guys can seek out. So look, that's the first 5 minutes, but really the next 45 minutes or so are going to be on the topic at hand, and Dave will describe some of those in a minute. But it's going to be getting really deep into some areas that we find interesting. And then I think over time, hopefully we'll solicit feedback from you guys that you find interesting. And then we plan to take the last 5 or 10 minutes of every episode and either address maybe some of your questions, maybe tell a joke or two, or maybe a collecting experience. But to keep things in a way where, if you're trying to consume this, let's say six or so episodes at a time, you can reliably know, where to find the content and how to get to it. Because we think that's, we think there's a lot of busy people, and part of our approach around this is there's a lot of busy kind of hobbyists out there that have jobs, that have families to manage, and they're trying to, get to the knowledge, but they don't have 6 or 7 hours to consume, some of this content. So, anyway.
Yeah, no, that, again, and, look, guys, speaking of kind of the, a lot of this conversation came out of the first time Bill and I got together. We did an IG live, and, for us, it was really comfortable. We ended up kind of going 3 hours when we meant to go maybe an hour plus. And it was like, hey, maybe we didn't do a good job of sort of cultivating topics appropriately and thinking about, if somebody else was on the other end. And so that's where, we know that there's a lot of things that are out there to kind of be, maybe could be even be handled in 15 minutes. But there's a lot of things that really can't. And so again, we want to be able to take a deep dive into some stuff, and have an opportunity to really be able to share that knowledge, that perspective, that the whatever wisdom from people that had shared with us, right? I didn't learn how to do a lot of what I do just because I was out there just hustling on my own. There were people that spent a great deal of time helping to educate me, teaching me some things, helping me really be able to refine where my interests were, how I was really approaching my collection, and just things to think about. And that's really where we think the value could exist in certainly the content that we provide, but it's also where we think that there's a real lack of value that may exist in the majority of what's being fed to us on Instagram feeds and Twitter feeds. And it's all about kind of right now. And it's not necessarily always learning lessons of the past and ultimately how you can apply that going forward. There are plenty of people that'll tell you that the previous generation of collecting and how things were done was a bunch of old fat guys that looked like me. But what I can tell you is some of us old fat guys built a fair bit of equity in what we do. And when you're LeBrons and Kobe's and other things are falling through the floor, like that doesn't bother me, and I own some of that stuff. But those are we want to talk about the topics that should be interesting to collectors and how you actually build up equity in your collection, not just from a monetary value either, how you build equity in it in terms of how you feel about it, how other people that relate to it, how the storytelling of what was important to you to add and or what you took out helped you kind of keep reshaping that path that you were on with the items that you have. And you'll hear Bill and I say a lot, if you're just here for the money, you ain't gonna be here very long, right? One of two things is gonna happen. You're either gonna go broke or you're gonna wish you had, because you're gonna just get stuck with a bunch of stuff that you don't like. So that's not, we don't want that to happen to people, and feel like, we've got enough to share with people to kind of help you get through that. So that's a good maybe transition into some of the items that we want to talk about going forward. So some of the topics that we've brainstormed through and that we will, we plan to deal with are, number one, and we think this one's important, early on is the concept of the reimagined collector experience. So we'll talk a little bit about that, who some of the players are in that space of trying to help you reimagine what it and help tell you what it is you ought to be doing. And remember, guys, go back to our commandments. We're not gonna, I'm not ever gonna tell you what to do. And Bill's not either. We're gonna tell you what we do and why we do it and why it's important to us and why we think it's a good way. And you can choose that or not. If you think you got a better way, by all means, man, fire the guns and get it done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Understand that sometimes the bullets don't land. Right?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about people that are trying to get you to reimagine your collector experience. We want to talk about how to build equity within your collection. We mentioned this earlier. Some of that has to do with building not just monetary equity, but emotional equity. You know, attachment equity, sharing that, you know, with somebody, relationship equity. Those are all things that should be part of any collector experience. So if you're not having that, we'll talk about, you know, some of the things we did to do that. Another fun one that we think could be good is some of the actual business lessons that I've learned. I've been going on this nearly a year. At the end of July, by the time I get the national, it'd be a year really doing this full time. And you know, I can talk about some of the things that went right, some of the things that went wrong, some of the things I'm dealing with, how some of the way I try to process some of the decisions, some of the noise that's out there. And I can even talk. We can talk some about, you know, the traditional finance world, what I had to do to sort of collateralize the business properly. But and those are things we think will be valuable to people, not just from the hobby perspective, but just in kind of how almost how you really manage your own personal finance. And that's a big deal, I think, going forward for a lot of people as you know, they sometimes maybe get a little more heavily allocated than they might be comfortable with. I know that was certainly true for me. You know, a little more heavy allocation into these things as, you know, possibly an alternative asset.
Well, and I'll just spend a little bit of time just talking about kind of an offshoot from that, from my own experience, kind of re-entering the hobby, which is, you know, we plan to have content that kind of addresses that, you know, the kind of new hobbyist or the found hobbyist. And you know, we're going to talk in quite a bit of detail around just the kind of structure of this industry. You know, who's who, who's what are all these acronyms you hear? Who are these companies? What are their vested interests? How do we think it all folds together? You know, how many auction houses can there be in the marketplace? Where to find some opportunities kind of within the synapses of those auction houses to create and build equity in your collections. You know, there's going to be some content that's going to be, you know, very consumable for the folks that, you know, are re-entering, and it may not be that interesting to folks that have been around for a while, and that's okay, right? I mean, that's kind of part of what we're trying to do, is making sure that we're curating content that kind of addresses, you know, the 14-year-old who's kind of thinking about this for the first time and trying to be thoughtful about it, or the 70-year-old guy or gal that's been at this for 40 or 50 years and is thinking about what direction to take next with their collection.
Yeah. A number of other areas that we're going to focus on is stuff that we both have heard, or even in our conversation with each other, that have sounded kind of scary. So some examples of that. Why vintage collecting should not be scary to you. Why autographs should not be scary. Why game use shouldn't be scary. Topics like why set collecting or player collecting might actually be a great personal collecting hack for some people. we will very, very soon, likely, maybe even next week, because I'm going to be at the Dallas Card Show this weekend. We could do a full round on card show etiquette and critiques. Certainly, as the card show world has kind of come back, and yeah, I mean, look, a lot of the tables are populated by some different characters that may have not existed before. We'll give you some perspectives and some ideas on that as a couple guys. I mean, I've attended hundreds of card shows now in my life and have some idea and on both sides of the table. So we can, we think we give some good perspective on some, hot tips and some do's and don'ts, depending on which side of the table you find yourself on. And I'll actually be on both sides this weekend, buying and selling. Another one that I want to do, and Bill and I may do this one together as well, is some tips for directing and managing your collection. So, in the little bit that I've gotten to know Bill, he's actually pretty focused in the things that he chases. They fall into some pretty unique and somewhat limited buckets. And then there's me.
The spaghetti and meatballs approach.
If it can be collected, I got some of it.
I promise, ladies and gentlemen, I promise he's not a hoarder. I promise.
He's not intentionally a hoarder, no. But when I show off a stack of 20 same card, it could feel like that a little bit. And look, that goes back to what we talked about earlier. We want that input from people that we get to know and people that we already know. And that was an area I actually sought specific help from a couple people that I'd gotten to know or people that I'm close to and just trying to overcome. So we, if it's a problem for us, we figure it's a problem for other people, or problems maybe not the right word, a challenge, how to deal with it. And we want to try and just share that.
Well, and I'd say, an offshoot of that, if I can, is we're going to do our level best to share with you, what our own opinions are around, maybe the top 10 items in our collections, or,
yeah,
I meant, I've shared this at least on my Instagram account, but just, top 10 rookies in baseball, right? Just actual cards, or, the best set from the 50s in football or baseball. We think that, some of that kind of educational content through the lens of an opinion is important for people to chew on, if only to set them on their own, path of discovery, to figure out what a certain parallel is, or why we decided to pick one set over another. Because I think that part of this, as we mentioned from the commandments, is that a lot of this stuff we need to have a healthy debate around. That's part of what makes this fun, right? I mean, when we were back in, when in our early days and we were trading cards, I mean, there's a reason why we traded one card versus another, right? We prioritize one versus another. That could have been a player, it could have been a set, or what could have been whatever. But those are some of the things that we plan to spend some time on to make sure that you guys and gals understand that, part of what makes this hobby so fun is how varied it is and how deep you can go, depending on what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And again, I'll add a unique perspective to that, because I'm pretty much in all the sports except hockey, but my man here, pretty deep hockey collector. I'm into the autograph space. Hasn't been his bag yet, but I'm going to do my level best to try to convince him that's where at least some of it needs to be. I get even into some of the, I'll call it alternative sports, so like Olympics and some other things that are maybe a little bit off the beaten path. And then, I'm a presidential collector, mostly autographs, but a few other knickknacks. I like the non-sports world. There's some entertainment stuff that appeals to me greatly. Tickets, we're going to piss you off with tickets. All you ticket haters out there, get ready for it. My man, Chuck Barkley's coming for you and your ticket nonsense. So, it'll be a little bit of everything. We think that range will kind of keep it fun, keep it exciting, keep it new every week. So, look,
yeah, and maybe one thing to add, just to kind of round things off, is we're gonna have guests on the show, but they're likely people that you haven't heard from before. We think there's a lot of recycling of guests in the kind of podcast YouTube space in our industry, which is fine, right? I think there are some people that have surely a lot of good things to say, and we will do our best to continue to promote those voices. But for every one of those individuals, there are dozens that don't have yet a voice, and we plan to shine a light on those things, and really, in some respects, hopefully take some angles that are kind of fairly differentiated in the market. So the one example I'll give you is, tying together baseball prospecting with interviewing a professional scout that's what they do for a living.
Yeah.
And talk about the baseball prospecting evaluation process. What matters to scouts, what matters to GMs and coaches. So that you guys can consume that content and decide what to do with it as you think about extending that into something like cards and like prospecting cards. So,
yeah,
guests are going to be a part of the show, but they're not going to, it's going to be something I think we kind of get to, over time.
Right.
So anyway.
Look, as we mentioned earlier, the main feature, brains, hair. Okay. Like it's going to be there every week. So look, Bill, we talked about we're under an hour, right where we're supposed to be. So unless you got anything else, I think maybe we'll cut this one off here and let people look forward to the first topical rodeo from the Cowboys.
No, I love it. I think that's a good place to stop. And again, we appreciate you guys hearing this out for the last hour or so. We hope to make this, again, as we said, extremely educational, but fun along the way. We felt like it was important on the front end to talk to you guys about just what we stand for and what are kind of the unmovable objects in our lives around this space. So you can kind of see that as a way of balancing the content that you do consume from us, and to know kind of where that where a lot of that stuff comes from. So thanks everybody, and we look forward to sharing more in the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah. So Sports Card Cowboys signing off. Adios, partners.
Adios, amigos and amigas.
Soon. Keep your eyes peeled, because we're coming back.
We're coming for you.
Bye, y'all.
See you, buddy.